Welcome back, Move Mountains listeners. This is a brand new podcast season, and so excited to be here with you with my colleague Shelby Hart, who's been a facilitator with Move Mountains for quite a while. How many years, Shelby?
Whew. I can't even remember I remember the first event. I'm not sure I remember the year. Maybe it was 2018
2018, I think that's about
with the
right.
Hyatt.
Yeah, 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last 7 years, Shelby and I have done quite a few facilitation events and coaching and training together. But today I wanted to spend the podcast time diving into Shelby Hart and who she is and what brought her to this position. Prior to being a facilitator and a coach, she was and still is licensed, but was in the nursing profession. So Shelby, way back when, not that far, but way back when, what first pulled you toward nursing or healing work?
I think it was a natural evolution for me. When I was 10, I spent a full month in the hospital. And I don't remember this, but my mom had said I had declared I wanted to be a nurse back then. So fast forward many years later, going to the University of Nevada, Reno, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. Like what 18-year-old does know exactly what they want to do. And so my college roommate was going into nursing, and I thought, wow, that would be great because I will always be employable. So why not go into nursing? And yet underneath that, really, there's this level of compassion that I've always naturally had for people. And I think it was an easy segue into accessing more of my natural gifts and talents. But back then, I didn't know that those were part of my superpowers, if you will.
Was there a moment early in that career that you realized it was part of your superpower?
No, I think it's not early in the career, kind of further along the line, right? When you're working with someone who is in a lot of pain, or maybe they're unconscious, or really just adding this level of dignity because you're able to hold this feeling of compassion for what somebody else is going through. Nowadays, I think they call it empathy when you're feeling empathy for other people, but it was really more compassion because it was all about my heart, how my heart felt dealing with people who needed nursing services.
So at some point, I imagine there was a shift in your understanding of what healing meant.
Yeah. Early on in my career, when I was in ICU trauma, I had an event that I didn't understand at that time, being 24. And I had a 16-year-old who passed away, and I had done everything to the T. I had done and executed my job all correctly. And yet the outcome wasn't what I wanted. And in that moment, it was really pivotal that it wasn't up to me, that it was up to something far beyond who I am and my skill set, or anyone's skill set, right? There was a group of us working with this 16-year-old. And so that really brought me to my belief patterns and how those started to form and the scaffolding of them. So that was foundational for me, really finding out in my heart that there's something beyond me.
You mentioned something beyond you, but you also say the belief patterns. For those of the listeners that aren't familiar with what you mean by that, what do you mean by belief patterns?
I had grown up with some different religion, but not really believing that there's something more than just our being, that there is God, that there is a creator, and there's something beyond the plan that we humans may have a plan for, right? Like, yes, we can co-create, but there's something beyond what we are capable of.
And so in that moment with the 16-year-old, that became real.
Yeah, really real. Yeah, it was a pivotal moment for me. It's pretty intense.
If you think about the months following that, how did that moment shape the way you showed up to nursing after that?
Well, at that time in my nursing career, I hadn't really solidified that knowledge that it wasn't something that I had done wrong, something that I had missed, some imperfection in my knowledge base that was why this young girl didn't make it. But really, in the truth of it, at this age, I believe, it was part of a bigger plan. And it didn't matter my stance in it, how correctly I did my job. It was not meant for her to live.
What does healing in 2025 mean to you, right? You've kind of moved past the life or death of nursing into this new work. How does healing show up in this?
That's a great question, because healing to me is not just physical. Part of the healing journey for someone is that they actually heal beyond the physical. And what do I mean by that? An example I have is someone who maybe has had a heart attack or an open heart surgery, something very significant for a physical body to go through. And that being the catalyst or the push for them to actually have an opening in their emotional body, in their mental body, that brings about healing, because they weren't conscious of it prior. That moment of this massive physical event caused them to open up, to expand. You can touche, but say the heart, right? Like breaking open the heart to heal an emotional wound that was present.
So that's intense.
Yeah. Well, that's what it took for somebody. I mean, I'm thinking of an example that they weren't able to do the work, the emotional work on their own, until their physical body demanded that they do the emotional work.
Walk me through this example.
So I'm thinking of my mom, and she went in for a routine procedure, and they ended up poking a hole in her heart. And when she...
Purpose?
No.
Okay. I was like, that doesn't sound like a normal routine.
No. It was an ablation where they go in and they cauterize a portion of the heart that is malfunctioning.
Yeah.
And they accidentally poked a hole in her heart. Typically, they will stop bleeding. They can get the bleeding to stop. Hers, they could not. So they had to open up her chest, put a stitch in the hole that they'd poked, and she woke up to being intubated, tied down, split in her chest. So fast forward. Sorry, Mom, I didn't ask for your permission to share your story, except Charlie likes to drill in on things. And the beautiful thing about my mom is she's willing to look at reasons why things happen, and she's open to it. Mm-hmm. And really found some places in her heart that she had not done some deeper work, that she hadn't been able to bring love to certain relationships and find a place of peace. And that's what I mean when I say a massive physical event occurs to open you up, to cause you, if you're willing, to have an emotional awakening, a healing.
So if we drill down on that concept for a moment, and this notion of what healing is today for you, I would assume what we're not saying is, if you're not dealing with your stuff, you're doomed to some physical trauma that's going to happen. Am I wrong there? Is that like, are you saying that if we're not dealing with the emotional being, that the physical being will?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Right? Each one of our life path is different.
Yeah.
And yet I truly believe that if we are not listening to the messages that show up as a feather to tickle us, to make changes in our lives, to expand our thinking, then that feather will turn into a stick. And that'll come in whatever form that gets your attention. And if you don't listen with the stick, then that stick becomes a brick. And if you still are not paying attention and listening to the signs and growing and changing, then it shows up as a lightning bolt. And I would call that a lightning bolt moment for my mom.
Yeah.
And there's so many layers to that story.
Well, and just as you say that, right, I think about a conversation we had years ago around the cycles, and every 7 years or so, these things will come back to us if there's still work to be done, right? And how, in our own stories, we think, okay, we've made it through that. And yes, we might make it through an emotional growth edge or some challenge, and I'd love to get into like some nitty gritty of like, what are those challenges that we need to work on? But then 7 years later, it's like, oh, there's more work to be done. There's more work to be done. And I don't know if the 7 years is just, fabricated or what, but tell me more about like that cycle. Is it relatively predictable, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not meant to be looked at through a negative lens. It's meant to be looked at as a gift. Yeah.
Well, we're here in life school, right? So everything is for our learning. And how we do that is very individual for each person, right? So finding the places that expand you and light you up and bring some excitement and joy into your life versus causing you to constrict and close down. And so the 7 years, it's funny that you say that, and I'm wondering, do you want to go into astrology?
No, I mean, is that where it comes from?
Well, I mean, we've all heard of 7-year itches, right? Well, those are Saturn's movement in somebody's charts. Not that I'm by any means an astrologer, but I find it fascinating. Some correlations, and so it's really just a cyclical nature. We live in seasons, right? Like right now we're in spring, and so in a year we have seasons, and life is the same way. We have different seasons.
In all this healing and all over the years, have you ever seen someone heal in a way that surprised you?
Well, something that comes to mind is, and I don't know, I think they credit Albert Einstein with saying this, but I'm not sure who said it exactly. There's 2 ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle, and the other is everything is a miracle. And I see everything as an absolute miracle, a miracle of life. And so really I'm never surprised and always excited to see something when people say, oh, you can never heal from this, or, there's a 1% chance. And what I think is like, how would you I almost want to say, how dare they give you those statistics, because they're planting seeds in your mind of what is capable or not capable. Like you have 2% chance of living. Well, that's just statistics, right? So don't be a statistic. Use your mind and your own thought and belief system to create the reality that you want in your own life.
So let's peel back that onion a little bit, right? Because in one sense, so far I've heard you say like, okay, there's a plan, there's something bigger than us, there's this other thing. And then on the other sense, it's like, hey, you have a tremendous amount of power with your mind. Where have you seen that work for people from a nursing perspective, using the mind positively?
So in the use of the mind positively, I love when I worked with a surgeon for many years, if somebody thought they were going to be better by having surgery, they absolutely were. If somebody didn't think surgery was going to work and they did it anyways, their chances for not having a great outcome significantly increased. That's just a simple non-study study that I did.
Unofficial study.
Unofficial study, yes, thank you. Yeah, it was an unofficial study that was very real. Very real. You could pretty much tell the people that were going to get better with surgery and those that weren't. But it was based upon their perception of life, their perception of things. And so really harnessing how we perceive our world, how we think about things is paramount to everything we do. So, yeah.
You said this get better, right? Is there a misunderstanding out there around what that means?
Well, I think getting better is a form of evolution, right? Like when I think of life, I think of a spiral, our spiral of becoming. So as we're climbing the path of our own mountain, whatever our life mountain may be, and that can switch through different phases of our life. But as you walk the path up the mountain, sometimes you're on the backside. And so your view of the mountain looks different than it does around the front. And so if we have challenges that show up, you're not the same person who dealt with that challenge 7 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever the case may be. We're always evolving. So getting better is relevant because we're always getting better.
Are we?
That's my intention.
Well, I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, I've heard though, right, change is inevitable and you're either deteriorating or improving. There's no such thing as a constant, right, in that sense of human beings. So I like that the intention there is like, yeah, I'm on the trajectory for personal improvement. But what, you go just Google self-help books or development. We're in the space of leadership development, team development. What does that even like? What are we aiming for when we say let's improve the leader, let's improve the person, let's improve the team? Like, is there clarity around what that means?
Well, I love that you brought up leadership, and considering we work at a leadership company, because a leader, the first tenet of leadership is leader know thyself. And so when we are talking about being better, we have to know who we are inside, what our triggers are, how we respond to them, and how we want to show up to lead our teams. But if we are not leading ourselves from a place of understanding and compassion, then we lead through our wounds. And so when people ask me, oh, how did you go from nursing into facilitating and coaching? And I say, well, the parts of nursing that I really get excited about is our mind and how our mind impacts our healing. And our mind is absolutely part of the connection in this equation from nursing to facilitation and move mountains. So it's the components of our mind that are absolutely paramount in how we develop as a leader, how we think about things. Because 5% of what we're operating on is in our conscious mind. 95% is in our subconscious. So if we're not paying attention to how we show up, we're showing up unconscious.
And inevitably, as a human being, whether they're coming into a leadership moment or into surgery, there's blind spots. So I get that 95% is in the unconscious. Is it even possible to bring it all to conscious awareness? Is that an objective? Like, when you say a leader know thyself, what are they aiming for? At what point, when you say leader know thyself, at what point do leaders know themselves well enough to feel good about it, right? Like, I guess my question is, if 95% of what we're doing is in the subconscious, it seems like a bit of a stretch. So I'm curious when they know themselves well enough.
Well, that's where the 5%, when you notice what you're noticing in your thought process, when you notice how you came to an interaction and you actually wanted it to be different, that's the moment of gold when you actually get to go, oh, wow, I didn't show up the way I wanted to. I'm going to circle back with this person and I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to let them know I didn't show up the way I wanted to and see, where can I be better, right? So it's about paying attention to your thoughts, and at the end of each day, go through, what did I learn? Where do I want to be better? What do I like that I did well, right? Like coming in and celebrating the stuff that you did well, and then also checking in and like, ooh, how could I do that better, right?
You bring up so many juicy moments in just that answer, right? For instance, you kind of casually threw out, just go to somebody and say, hey, I didn't handle that very well. How could I handle it better? That's terrifying for a lot of people. What's the trick?
Well, as a leader, when there's this level of humility in knowing that you don't have all the answers, right? I think our society has really set us up to think that if you're on the stage or have the title, that you have to have all the answers. And I think that that's where we're wrong. When we collectively come together and harness the wisdom in the room and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. I need you. I need your support. Then you start leading from a level of a higher octave, if you will. And that's where I think coming to know yourself, knowing the stories that you're telling yourself, paying attention to what you're thinking, like really getting down to the nitty-gritty of how you function, not just sitting on autopilot, which is a default for all of us, right? Because it uses a lot less energy when we're in our default mode. And that conscious awareness, Move Mountains, being a mindful leadership training company, this is where what we focus on, how we know how things show up on the outside to give us reference of, oh, yeah, that went well. Oh, there's some improvement here that needs to happen. And one of the biggest points with Move Mountains and why we're so different, in my opinion, is we're not perfect. And we recognize that we're not perfect, that we are works in progress. And I'm continually striving to be my best self. Books I read, times that I'm triggered or upset, like really doing my processing work.
And the culture, for those that aren't aware, we have some pretty fascinating conversations in team meetings, right? Because we hold each other accountable to doing our own work. So no one's really let off the hook. And we have difficult conversations quite often inside the organization. I appreciate the willingness to engage in that, right? Because that can be a stretch for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't love to sit in those shoes of like, oh, wow, I feel nauseous. My palms are sweating. I am sitting in so much shame or embarrassment in this moment to be able to actually work through it. And that's what I mean when I say leader, know thyself. It's like, whew, inside right now, I'm triggered and I'm making a conscious choice how I'm showing up, how I'm actually leaning in versus retreating and running away. And the way I can do that is particularly with you, because I feel safe. So setting up a container of feeling psychologically safe, that it's okay to do our deeper work. Because commonly when we come into teams, what we're doing is helping people bring things to the forefront that are not necessarily comfortable, but need to be fleshed out for the team to move further, faster.
What's interesting is you say that the first thing that comes to mind is, you mentioned feelings of shame, feelings like sweaty palms, the physical response and the emotional response to feedback that can be challenging. What in you says, okay, this is mine versus, hey, this is the leader's delivery, right? If I'm giving you that feedback, I have a lot of instances that I can think of where the person receiving the feedback says, well, the leader shouldn't make me feel shame. And I have leaders that then say, well, that wasn't my intention, right? Where's the breakdown? How did you get to a point where you own it as your own and we can then proceed?
Well, first of all, I'm very in tune with how I feel and what emotion or memory that triggers that emotion takes me back to. And as soon as I get the picture within me of like, oh, this is familiar, second grade, boom, whatever was occurring, then I know it's mine. It's not yours. You are offering me a gift because you brought something to the forefront that I have yet to heal, that I have not yet come to this place of peace within myself around it. And so any trigger on the outside, and this has come with many decades of work, yeah. But any trigger on the outside is really a beautiful gift for me because it's saying, hey, Shelby, look here a little deeper. There's still some healing for you to do, still some work here, still some compassion to bring to yourself around this challenge. And I can point the finger at someone else, like the leader making me feel this way, then I'm playing the victim role. And that's not where I intend to be. I am a co-creator of my reality. And that's where I step into being more of, okay, let's dig in. Let's dig a little deeper. How can I sit in this and allow the discomfort to be there and not respond? Not react, but respond.
What do you mean by that? The difference between reacting and responding?
So reacting, I might just lash out at you, or I might close down or withdraw or retreat, versus just sitting in it and going, okay, yeah, I need a minute to work through this. I'm feeling all of this emotion run through my body and knowing that it really is just asking for my attention. It's asking for my level of compassion for myself, to be more compassionate with myself.
It occurs to me then that as a leader, and we've had these experiences where you've had to be just holding the space for me to be a mess and vice versa. And I say mess in the loving way of like, as you're processing, it feels like, what is going on? I'm dealing with this. It kind of feels messy. And I love that. I want to celebrate that because that's where the joy is. That's where the good work is, right? But, and I know we can play with that word a little bit, but as the person that's perhaps offering the feedback and then observing and being present as someone is making the choice between reacting and responding and going through that process, how do you stay open-hearted, or in other words, create the space for them to do that without over-attaching to it?
Well, I think it's in the unseen, right? When you, as a facilitator, come into a space, there's an energy that's created, and it goes to energy medicine or energy healing, is an interesting topic, which maybe isn't believed by too many people. And yet I would assert everybody knows when they walked into a meeting and they go, whew, can cut the tension with a knife in there, right? Like you know that is the energy you're feeling. And so in creating a container that is sacred by the work that we do, we allow for people to have their emotions, to not be judged, to feel safe by digging a little deeper, by not being overexposed, and never leaving somebody in a raw instant, right? Like allowing that soothing part to come through. And I think that ties back to why I became a nurse in the first place. A level of compassion and care for the human, for people that are in pain. And I've had several people share how safe they felt, even though they didn't want to do the work or it felt a little uncomfortable, that they felt safe with us to do it.
We talk a lot about the drama triangle in our work, right? The rescuer, the victim, the persecutor. How do you show compassion and offer support to people in that moment of suffering? I love you said you don't overexpose them to suffering. How do you do that in a way that doesn't rescue them, but really empowers them to kind of step into their own worth?
Well, in the work that we do, it's super fun when we bring in challenges, a challenge that allows this to naturally be revealed. Because when you're in a challenge with your team and you're going through it, when you have those aha moments, whenever I see a leader have an aha moment of like, oh, wow, look what I just did. And my whole team witnessed it. Like doing it in a kind of a fun way because you were just doing a challenge and then it naturally revealed itself, which is such a beautiful gift to the whole group when that occurs. So I think I might have just gotten off topic with where you were wanting to go with that. But it's fun. We get to bring some fun into a group and allow the magic to happen.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is the sense of discovery, right? The reason we bring an adventure mindset to the work, right? The allowing people to self-generate and uncover themselves a little bit and discover that. I guess my question was really geared to, let's say you're a leader and you've just had this difficult conversation, a feedback conversation with one of your team members, and you can't like go for an adventure day or do something fun, right? You're in it right there in the office and you've got 5 minutes till your next meeting. How do you, in that instance, hold that space and not rescue?
You meet people where they're at. I mean, that's someone who's playing a victim role, and it's a default in our brains, right? It's kind of the way we're wired. And when you help them recognize what role they're playing and consistently offer them support, not by rescuing, but by seeing them as really powerful beings, seeing them as perfectly capable. So as the leader, to change your viewpoint of the person adds more space for them to make changes and then to bring in some coaching moments. Because as leaders, we're all coaches, right? And coaches aren't always telling, they're asking questions. They're asking good questions to help the person open up.
It's fascinating, as you say, let people kind of allow them to discover it and help them see where they are. I picture a leader being like, you're being a victim. Like, that's not what you mean, I imagine, right? It's more of, so can you give me an example of how would you phrase it? I know that's a difficult question, but I'm trying to just really practically, and we can come back to it, but this sense of like what you described was the work to be done in that instance of a leader giving feedback to somebody who's now struggling with feedback isn't work for the leader to do, just punch the mic, isn't the leader's work to do for the person. It's the leader's work to do in themselves. It's the leader's work to do to shift their mindset to, this is a fully capable human being that can work through this, that I don't need to go fix, right?
I think the first thing I would ask the employee is, what do you need from me to move beyond whatever the circumstance is? And then, that's also part of our training is the thought model, right? Like the circumstance itself is neutral, and yet it's our thought about the circumstance that really is where we have the most control. And yet we are all driven by how we feel about things. Like it motivates everything we do, how we want to feel.
Yeah.
And so if we pay attention to our thoughts, and this comes back to how are we thinking about things, right? Like literally that is the motivation. You want to make a change, start, if you want to see what you've been thinking, look at your life, because it won't lie. It's giving you all the details. However, are you paying attention to it?
Or are you using that to just validate and verify the kind of construct you've created, right? Oh, things are hard. And then we just seek ways to confirm that. It brings up the question that we asked a few days ago around, before you decide, before you make a decision, before you choose a path, ask yourself the question, am I okay? Right? And really, the answer to that question will largely drive a whole series of choices that come after. And the follow-up to that is, am I sure? Right? Like, I'm okay. Or, maybe I say, oh yeah, I'm fine. Really? Are you really digging into what's irking you, what's bugging you? I think there's this reality that I see in you that's so beautiful around shifting from nursing to facilitating and coaching, staying in the healing space, staying in the energy work. What was it about the medical world that wasn't a full expression of what you wanted to give in your lifetime?
That's a great question. It brings me immediately to a story of the day I gave my notice to nursing. I was driving to work and on the back road, so I wasn't going very fast. And this song came on the radio by camp, and the lyric that really struck me, like it shot me, literally felt like it shot me through the heart. And it said, "Are you a life force?" And I burst into tears hearing that lyric. I kept hitting repeat and I just started sobbing. And I knew in that moment I needed to make a change because I was not living my soul purpose and living into the highest form of me. And that's when I started to shift energy and made a different decision. That same day I gave my notice after working with the same surgeon for 20 years. Wow. And it was a big moment. And yet there was no chance. Well, there's always chance, but I just knew I had to do it, right? And this internal knowingness inside of me had to move, had to shift the energy, or I was going to get sick or end up with cancer or something bad was going to happen because there was so much longing for something different. And I didn't really have my backup plan. I had just knew that I needed to move some energy, and I took the leap. And then life started orchestrating itself around my next profession, if you will. Intermove mountains after my van trip for a few months, into doing more work that I feel is aligned with my soul purpose and my heart.
I got to imagine that one lyric, right? It was perhaps the straw that broke the camel's back or something. There must have been moments leading up to that where you had inclinations and it still wasn't a shift. What were there signs that when you look back on it, you're like, oh my gosh, I waited too long? Or, there's a lot of people out there that are going, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? But I have to work. I have to bring in money. Like, where was the early signs of that?
Well, there were lots of early signs. The disconnect between my mind and the way I thought about what I needed to do to pay the mortgage and raise the kids and do, in air quotes, what you're supposed to do versus what my heart wanted to do. And I guess the good thing is those things had been settled, right? The kids were taken care of. They were out of the house. And so I felt like I had more freedom to make my own decision and start to live more into what I wanted to do with my life. So my responsibilities had shifted.
Okay.
And yeah, there were lots of signs, and yet my mind told me, you have to do this. And my heart was like, no, I don't want to do this.
But that's compelling in and of itself, right? You recognized an obligation, a responsibility. I mean, I think to our brothers and sisters in the military, right? Who, they're doing something with honor and really dignity that may or may not be what they want to do, might not be where their heart is at, right? So I think the challenge is if listeners go, well, not all of us can have the luxury of doing what our heart wants in any given moment. What I'm hearing from you is, yeah, that's right? That if we have obligations and responsibilities, sometimes the heart has to take a back seat while we meet those obligations and fulfill the responsibilities that were a result of early choices that we made. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, it's like taking a leap of faith, right? Trusting in a bigger vision of your life. It's almost like you start to connect with your soul and start to live a soul purpose, right? I lived my human purpose, what I thought I was supposed to do, what society told me I was supposed to do. And then I started connecting at a deeper level within myself, knowing myself more and making different choices. And my viewpoint changed, right? Like I just started, one of my favorite saying is, oh my gosh, how much better can my life get? Right? How much better can my life get? Really, truly is my mantra. Yeah. And so I open up that space for how much better can life get? And then I get to work with people and witness them having openings for more of who they are. And it's really just such a beautiful thing when you're working with a team or individuals where you help them shine the light in some area and hold the space for them to be able to look in that. Look at what the light is shining.
Give me an example, right? Like a moment you witnessed a breakthrough.
Well, there's so many of them. The first one that popped into my mind was in a coaching series with a woman. And when she said, I have been able to get off all of my psych meds and live into more of what my life meaning is, my life purpose is, because she was so disconnected from what her heart wanted and what she was doing. And so when she lined those two things up, it was really just the most profound thing to witness over our 6 months of working together. It was incredible.
And
not that I'm suggesting people get off their psych meds. No, she did do that with her medical professionals. Right. But it was really about her being more honest with herself, just getting real with herself and trusting her ability to make decisions and move in life that felt supporting.
And I am gathering that might have been terrifying in a lot of ways because it probably led to a different future for her. I'm imagining our listeners going, well, that future's, there's too much uncertainty. I can't, I still have to pay the bills. I still have to do X, Y, and Z, right? We have that obligation. How do you know, or is it a question of knowing that once you take that leap, it'll all work out? Like, what do you do there?
Hey, look, when I gave the notice at my job after a very long tenure, I didn't know. I didn't have my backup plan. I just knew I wasn't going to do that any longer. That was the clearest message I had had. And I acted on it. And now I keep asking, how much better can my life get? And I loved my colleagues, and the work that we did. I just wasn't in love with my job at that time. And so I was looking for something bigger, something that I could express more of me. And that's really what this whole journey has led me to this moment, is the work that I continue to do to find more of me wanting to show up as me. And so there is no clear path. It's not what my path was, might not be the right path for you or someone else listening. It's trusting yourself enough to know, where am I going next? And connecting with that higher source that we talked about back in my early days in ICU trauma, right? Finding the source that you trust and working in tandem with that to move you forward. We're not going to have all the answers. And that's our thinking mind our intellectual mind wanting to have all the answers. And yet sometimes you just have to trust from your heart and know that it's going to be okay. But you have to take a step. Because see, what happens in our mind is we want to have everything worked out. We want to see the results before we're willing to take the step. But that's not the way it works. We have to take the step and then the results start to come through. I just got really excited about this. I'm like, yeah, now we're getting into my jam. We're in my groove.
Yeah, keep going. Where is that? Because I did notice that, and if you're watching this, you saw her sit up straighter. She got her tone shifted. What's the excitement there?
It's about the way we've been trained. We've been trained, do this, that's your result. Do this, and then you get this outcome. And really, it's much bigger than that. It's trusting. It's creating this vision in your mind of what you want, and then focusing the energy on that. What do you want? And then revisit it, upgrade it, read it every day, your vision, focus in on it. And then also hold it lightly in your hand, right? You energize it and then you let it go. You energize it and then you let it go, right? And start to see how the world starts to deliver, or the universe starts to deliver the things that you really want. But it's not going to give it to you. So here's what my mentor tells me. You can be willy-nilly with the universe, and the things you get will be willy-nilly. If you are specific and focused and clear on what you want, that's what starts to come to you. And then the things that show up in your life that are not that thing that you wanted, they're not roadblocks. They're stop signs to ask you, is this really what you want? Get you to clarify, what are you clear with? What do you really want? Yeah, I still want that thing. This is my vision.
Just in you saying that, the first thing that came up was how often we work with people where the most profound thing, and it's so simple, but it's just being clear about what you need from the other person, right? And the practice of asking for that support and saying, hey, this is what I need to move forward with you.
Well, and most of us don't know what we want. And I
Exactly,
mean, it's
that's what
not at the fault of the person. They just don't know. And the reason being is because we've never
Ask the
really
question.
been asked, hey, what do you really want? Right? Because it starts when we're little. And, oh, what do you want? Oh, you can't have that. Money doesn't grow on trees. Oh, you can't have that. Right? Like there's all these conditions. And so it's ours to start to repattern and change the way we perceive the world and how it's honestly is.
So help me understand, because you go from like the universe and ours to decide and ours to create, and then earlier, right, this recognition of a higher power for you. Uh, Listeners, that could look like any number of things, right, depending on your faith background or whatnot. But where do those two overlap? Where do they contradict? Like, is it a contradiction or is it not?
I think to me that they're kind of the same thing, right? Like God, if you say God, well, grand overall design, or right? Like it's there's something more than us, right? Like, wouldn't that be completely egotistical if we just thought we were humans and we are the pinnacle of everything that's been designed? No, there's something much bigger than us. Do I know exactly what that looks like? I have a sense of it. I don't have a picture. It is not a guy that's white with a beard that's up in the sky. Like, that's not my vision of what this is. It's an energy. It's an energetics, the universe. So I use the universe, God, interchangeably to me.
I'm just wondering, there, like, knowing you and knowing the work, there's a lot of validity still to this sense of knowing where the line is between the divine and what we're called to do ourselves. The one that I remember hearing is like, you can pray that the bus doesn't leave without you, but you better run to the bus, right? Like, you still have to do the work. You still have to put in the effort and the action. And to me, that is applicable regardless of your world belief or your God belief, structure, system, faith practice. That still applies. I still have to do the work, right? And yet, no matter what I do, there is something bigger than me, is what I'm hearing from you. And I would agree that there's something bigger than me that in the case of the 16-year-old in ICU, right? It's like, you can do everything just right and it doesn't matter. So I guess the question is, like, does that mean that we shouldn't be doing the work, right?
I think if we're breathing and we're aware, we're doing the work. About being aware of our impact on other people that we come in contact with, how we show up each day, how we do things when other people aren't watching, right? Like, where are we being the person that we want to see other people be, right? And particularly bringing it back to leadership, if we are leading in a way that we want the people we're leading to show up, then we're doing the work, right? We can't say, bring positivity and then never be positive, or never strive to see things through a lens of, how can I see this in a different light? How can I see this to be more positive? And positivity is a mindset, right? It's not a feeling, it's a mindset. So it's how we're viewing our world. And I mean, one of the biggest things I think of is, one of my mantras or affirmations or prayers, if you will, is not to take all the pain, all the suffering that I've incurred in my life, not to take it away, but to give me the strength and the grace to handle it with as much ease as possible, right? Just to help me learn what my lesson is here, that I may be better, that I can show up better for the people that I work with, for the people that I coach, the people that I stand in front of.
And when you say show up, right, there's a sense of presence. I'm curious, what part of you is the easiest to bring present into a space with other people? And what part of you is hardest to get present?
I think naturally places that I show up with, I feel like I bring a lot of heart, like a lot of, which is cute because my last name is Hart. But a natural tendency is to show up with compassion and love for the people I'm working with. And the second part of that question is, which is the hardest part of me to allow to show up? Those are my insecurities, the places that when I notice that I'm triggered, to allow myself to be vulnerable in a group, because that's, never fun. And yet that might be the work to be done. And it helps me bring more compassion when I'm working with a group where someone may be in a place of needing some compassion because they're going through some work.
What would you tell somebody who's on, they may have heard you speak today and they may be like, oh, there's a change coming for me. What would you tell somebody who's on that cusp?
Wow, as you said that, I just, like my whole heart expanded and I felt it ripple through both my arms. And so I guess I would open my arms and say, welcome. I would love to meet you, to spend time with you, to get to know who you are.
What do you trust now in this wise age that was hard to trust then?
I love the way you phrase that question because it makes me think you could have easily said, at this age, how old are you? What do you have the wisdom
To trust?
I think to trust my inner knowing, to trust myself. And when something feels off, to trust myself, not talk myself out of it, not reason myself into a different position, but to really trust my years of wisdom. Yeah. Just trust myself.
Any final words, questions, thoughts?
Yes, I'd love to know from you, Charlie. What is it about Move Mountains that inspires you the most?
Well, for 11 years, we've had the mentality of keep your head down, do the work, don't fake it. And every once in a while, we get feedback, and it's more than every once in a while, it's pretty consistently. The feedback is, wow, I didn't expect the growth to come. I didn't expect to discover X, Y, or Z. Thank you for leaning in. Thank you for trusting us. And thank you for having faith in us. So I think the most inspiring thing for me is when we can bring a level of expectation for human beings that sometimes they've lost for themselves, and see in them the gifts and the strengths and the courage that people struggle to often see in themselves, and then match that with some challenge and some push and some support that says, all right, what do you want to do now? Let's go. And seeing people respond positively to that and create their own future that is more in alignment with who they are and more empowering. I wake up every day excited to work. Yeah. Thanks for doing it with me.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And listeners, if you have any questions for Shelby, hit her up. Shelby, how can they find you? You can just email her, shelby@movemountains.com.
That's right.